When you think of express trains on a metro system, you probably think of New York. But there are also other systems that have express trains, such as in Hong Kong, Philadelphia, and the topic of this video, London. I'm often surprised by how many people don't know that the London Underground has express services, so that's what I'm hoping to fix with this video. First, I need to define what counts as an express service. I'd count any service that follows the same route as another service, but while making fewer stops. If the two services connect the same stations but follow substantially different routes, I wouldn't count that as an express local service pair. The most extensive express service on the Underground is the Metropolitan Line. During peak periods, there are 3 different stopping patterns between Moore Park and Baker Street. Slow trains make all stops, semi-fast trains skip the 2 stops between Harrow-on-the-Hill and Wembley Park, and fast trains also skip the 4 stops between Moore Park and Harrow-on-the-Hill. Outside of peak periods, there is still some express service, with trains from Amersham and Chesham typically operating semi-fast. But that's not all the express service on the Metropolitan Line, because east of Wembley Park, it shares a corridor with the Jubilee Line. Jubilee Line trains stop at all 8 stations between Wembley Park and Baker Street, but the Metropolitan Line operates express, skipping all stops except Finchley Road. The 2 lines share a 4-track corridor, with the Metropolitan Line using the outer tracks and the Jubilee Line using the inner tracks. It's also worth mentioning that Chiltern Railways shares the same corridor between Amersham and Finchley Road. On the central segment, it has a dedicated pair of tracks adjacent to the quad-track London Underground line, but between Amersham and Moore Park, Metropolitan Line trains share tracks with the mainline services. The Metropolitan Line fast trains also stay on the mainline tracks all the way to Harrow-on-the-Hill. Another example of express service is on the Piccadilly Line. Between Acton Town and Earl's Court, the District Line stops at 7 intermediate stations, while the Piccadilly Line only stops at Hammersmith and Barons Court. And sometimes Turnham Green, but usually not Turnham Green. For most of the segment, the Piccadilly Line uses the 2 center tracks, while the District Line uses the outer tracks. At the stations served by the Piccadilly Line, there's a cross-platform interchange to the District Line. Stamford Brook Station has an unusual configuration with a platform on the westbound Piccadilly Line, but not on the eastbound Piccadilly Line. That's because before the Piccadilly Line was built, the current island platform on the south side served both directions of the District Railway. When the railway was widened to 4 tracks to make room for the Piccadilly Line, there was never any plan to stop the Piccadilly Line at Stamford Brook, so the 2 new tracks on the north side only got one side platform for the District Line. That left the north side of the island platform largely unused to this day. The Docklands Light Railway is not officially part of the London Underground, but it is a metro system and it is on the London Underground map. So I think it's worth talking about the local express pair between the DLR's Stratford International branch and the Jubilee Line. Between Stratford and Canning Town Station, the DLR stops at 4 intermediate stations, but the Jubilee Line only stops at West Ham. In this case, the 2 lines have their own dedicated pair of tracks next to each other, which unfortunately means that there's no cross-platform transfer between the local and express services. The Elizabeth Line is not a London Underground line, and it's not a metro line at all. It's actually a regional rail line operated by Transport for London, which in my opinion qualifies it as a London Overground line. But I guess that's a bit of a hot take that I'm not going to get into here. In any case, it is on the tube map, so it is worth noting that it has express services as well. Outside of peak periods, there are 4 different stopping patterns west of Paddington. Trains to Heathrow Terminal 4 call at all stations, but the rest of the trains skip a few stops here and there along the way. The Elizabeth Line doesn't seem to have any specific names for the various stopping patterns, unlike the Metropolitan Line. In practice, passengers are just expected to pay attention to the notices at the stations and on the train to figure out which station any given train actually stops at. During peak periods, there are also 4 stopping patterns, but in that case, the fastest express services to Reading now skip 8 stations along the way. Unlike the previous examples, the express and local services on the Elizabeth Line actually share the same 2 tracks. That segment of line travels along the Great Western Main Line, which does have 4 tracks, including 2 express tracks. But those tracks are used by much faster intercity services, which the Elizabeth Line would not be able to keep up with. So all of the Elizabeth Line services use the local tracks, including the Elizabeth Line express trains. This is possible because the service frequency along this part of the Elizabeth Line is low enough that express trains can be scheduled to depart Paddington quite long after a local train, leaving enough room for them to not catch up. And while we're talking about TfL's rail services, I might as well mention the express service on the Lee Valley lines, also known as the Weaver Line. There are 2 main routes for the Lee Valley lines, which diverge at Hackney Downs. Trains to Chingford skip 2 stations between Bethnal Greens and Hackney Downs. And in this case, they do actually use the separate pair of express tracks. Those tracks are also used by intercity trains heading along the West Anglia Main Line. So I guess I should probably introduce myself. I'm Ontario Traffic Man, and I make videos in my spare time about whatever I find interesting. My channel doesn't really have a consistent theme, but my interests are generally transit and roadway infrastructure. I'm currently working on a video about the recently renovated Trillium Line in Ottawa, and why it's so slow. And after that, I'm probably going to make some more videos about traffic signals. So if any of that sounds useful to you, you can come over and have a look. And either way, thanks for watching.